Hey guys, thanks for watching my video. So I've been doing a little bit of work on shoring up and creating my own preflop ranges, and with that I put together this spreadsheet to help me study a little bit more, and I thought I'd share with the rest of TBR to get your feedback, provide this as a resource to others if they choose to use it, and potentially improve on this in the future based on any thoughts that other people have. So I'm relatively new to TBR. I'm also relatively new to solvers in general, but as I've really dived down the rabbit hole of using solvers, one of the things that I struggled with a little bit at first was the assumptions that are inherent in every solve that are critical to the output that the solver will generate. Now, some of the solver assumptions, such as my opponent's range, I understand that I'm never going to get 100% correct. But where I struggled a little bit was coming up with my own preflop ranges and making sure that those are dialed in every single possible formation, and that they're going to be consistent and accurate every single time, at least from a baseline perspective. Obviously, if I have different reasons to deviate, or different players in different positions, that may cause me to be a little looser or tighter preflop. That's a different scenario, but it's important to have that baseline down. And I realized that while I did have while I did have a pretty good idea of what my ranges are in every single situation, there are definitely some situations where I may play hands differently, for no rhyme or reason, right? They might be edge cases where sometimes based on how I'm feeling, I might open it, sometimes I might 3-bet it, sometimes I might fold it, and that's affecting the outputs of my solver. So I put this together to kind of help me do a little bit more work to really make sure that I nailed down what my own preflop ranges are in every single situation. So I thought I'd spend the rest of this video going through this spreadsheet. So I put the spreadsheet together, and this first page here is just a little bit of an overview of the page itself. So there's just some instructions on how you actually update things, and then just details of each of the individual worksheets. But really the bulk of this is on these 3 tabs here: the ranges, the summary stats, and the quiz. So I'll start off with the ranges, and what this tab is showing is this is really all of the raw data that we have for every single possible hand that we could have pre-flop. So as we start here, we have aces, working down all of our pocket pairs, and then we have our suited hands, so suited aces to offsuit aces, suited kings, offsuit kings, etc. And really, you see here we have all 169 possible combos that we have for hands. I've also included how many combos for each of those hands are worth, and then just some general characteristic information. So the pairs, just a binary yes or no, whether they're a pair or not. The suited hands, just again binary yes or no, whether the hand's suited or not, and then just a little bit of information around the connectedness. So if the hands are connected, then it obviously is connected, whether there's a 1-gapper, 2-gapper, or 3-gapper, and then there's the not connected pieces, which is more than 3 gaps. They can't make a straight with the 2 cards, and then the pairs are obviously not applicable here too. So we have some base information around the hand itself, and then what I did here is I have, based on all of our scenarios, what I would choose to do in those spots. And this is really where the engine of this spreadsheet lies, and this is where you would actually fill in yourself. So starting with the RFI, the raise first ins, I simplified it and I just broke it down to early position, middle position, late position, which is everything except for the button. So this might be something like cutoff and or cutoff and hijack, and this is the button. I also left out small blind here because I mostly focused on full ring live play, and a lot of times if it's folded to the small blind, we're just chopping as it is anyways. Early position might be under the gun to like under the gun +2. Middle position might be something like under the gun plus, early position might be under gun +1, middle position might be under the gun +2, and the low jack, late position might be somewhere between the hijack and cutoff, and then the button is the button, obviously. So, what would I do in all of those situations? I kind of just put a binary raise or fold here on all of my RFI decisions, and you can kind of see where that cutoff is. Then in the blue here, this is all of my actions against the raise first in. So again, I try to simplify this as much as possible. I didn't want to do iterations for every single possible formation combo. So really, this is a if I'm in position versus an early position raise, what do I do? If I'm in position versus a middle position raise, what do I do? If I'm in position versus a late position raise, what do I do? And then the same 3 combos, but if I'm out of position. So in this case here, if I'm essentially in the blinds versus one of those spots. Then going back to the green, which is kind of this first spot. So if I raised and someone 3-bet me, well, how would I handle those 3-bets? And then again, here, these are kind of the different spots that I might be in. So if I'm in early position and the 3-better is in position, what would I do here? Would I raise and 4-bet them? Would I call that 3-bet, or would I fold? Early position versus out of position. So this is if I'm raising early position and then someone from the blinds 3-bets me. Same thing from the middle position spots, same thing from the late position spots, and then, obviously from the button, I can only get 3-bet by the blinds. I have my 3-bets versus 4-bets, so you'll see if I'm in position and the early position raiser, the guy who raised first in, then 4-bet me. Here I have 2 options here, which is I can either shove, or I can call. I'm choosing to look at not super deep scenarios, so that I'm not necessarily going to have a 5-bet range. That's not a 5-bet push. So I can either shove or I can call. And then you're going to see some of these NAs right here, and that's just because I would never make it to the scenario. So using this example in this spot here, you see jacks if I'm in position versus early position. I would have just, versus a raise first in, I would just call that in this spot here. I'm not going to necessarily 3-bet that, so because I would never be in that spot as a 3-bet, I would also never be in that spot as a 4-bet. And then finally, this is versus a 5-bet shove. So if in this case here, if I 4-bet one of these spots here, I have this 5-bet shove, so I can either call or I can fold things. So, obviously if I have something like ace-5 suited, which might be the polarized bluffs, I'm going to fold those, whereas, if I have aces, I'm obviously calling that. So, I have these spots, and I haven't finalized what my ranges actually are, so they're not really, it's really not that important to look at the details of what these components are, but I think what's important is now I'm showing every single scenario that I could be in with all of my hands, and I put this together, and what I think this actually does for me is 2 things. Well, one, I have this spreadsheet on the summary stats, which lets me take a look at, in general, based on what I entered into this first sheet here, what my frequencies look like. So based on what I entered in here, I'm looking at a early position raise first in percentage of 19%, middle position at 24%, late position at 27%, and on the button at 46%. As you start moving down, it gets a little bit more complicated here. So versus a raise first in, if I'm in position versus an early position raise, I'm going to continue with 210 combos. 168 of those are flats and 42 of those are 3-bets. So what I would look at total is I'm going to 3-bet 3% of my range in that spot there, and I'm going to flat 13% of my range for a total of 16% continuing, and so on for all of these other spots. And then as I get into some of these more detailed scenarios here, so for instance, in this spot here, I'm middle position versus out of position here versus a 3-bet. I get there with 318 different combos, and you'll see that number is going to be the same as this 318. So I have 318 combos that I've raised from middle position. Of those 318 combos that I've raised from middle position, If I get 3-bet, I'm going to continue with 174 of those. So I'm going to continue with 55% of the hands that I raised with in the first place. But that's only going to be 13% of my total range. And then of those 174 hands, I'm going to flat 132 of those, and I'm going to 4-bet 42 of those. So, again, of the hands that I could continue with, I'm going to continue with 55% of those. Of those, 42% of those are going to be flats, and 13% of those are going to be 4-bets, where the other 45% are going to be folds. And this can help me visualize what this looks like as a total of my whole range, though. So it's really just the top 3% of my range that I'm 4-betting here, or maybe the top 2% plus some bluffs. And then so on, the same exact thing down here for the 4-bets and 5-bet shoves. You can kind of see how these frequencies work. Again, my ranges aren't completely dialed in, but I think what is helpful about looking at it this way is I can start taking a look at and visualize from a mathematical standpoint, how do I actually weight my different ranges from a frequency standpoint, and how do and are there any leaks? So based on what I'm actually looking at, am I continuing with too many hands? So, I might look at this and say, okay, well, I'm continuing with 90% of hands. That might be a little much for that scenario. Maybe I actually want to get rid of some of those hands, or move those into folds, or move, and not necessarily continue with as many hands. Or maybe I need to add more hands into my 3-bet range in this spot here too. So it can open my eyes to how to actually adjust my ranges a little bit based on the frequencies that I'm actually seeing. So the last component I wanted to share was this little quiz here. So again, what I noticed here was, and I have this sheet which I haven't really filled in yet, but this was meant to just take some screenshots and from Flopzilla and put it on this sheet here, so I could actually look at different ranges. But that's how I've really studied a lot in the past, is looking at ranges, whether it's on Upswing or other sites, and trying to internalize ranges that way. And it's done a good job for the most part of giving me a good sense of what those ranges look like. But I think that's pretty synonymous with watching videos or reading books, where you only take so much information in, but if you're not necessarily testing yourself, you're not going to pick it up completely. So I wanted to create some way for me to actually quiz myself. So that's where I developed this little quiz spreadsheet. And, again, it's tied back to these ranges that we have here. So based on this, and, I have this here, this random hand is, I can basically just hit function F9, and that will change this random hand. So as if I just keep changing this, this will, this in here is basically, I'm just using a random number generator to pick a random hand for me. And based on the way Excel works, it'll just recalculate this every single time I change a cell. So if I enter something in here, it'll continue to recalculate that, and that's kind of annoying. So what I basically did was, if you come up with something, so using this as an example, let's just say Queen 10 suited. Once I get a random hand here, I might just enter Queen 10 suited. And you'll see this changed actually, because I entered something in here, but this is what the spreadsheet is based off of. So now I have Queen 10 suited. So you'll notice a couple things. So one, there are some things that are conditionally formatted to black this out, and that's really because I don't have an action in those spots. You'll see if I just put in aces, everything's unblocked out, so all of my options are on the table, but I have Queen 10 suited, so I don't ever get into those spots. But what it allows me to do is I can actually go through and say, well, what am I actually going to do in each of those spots? So, raise first in, I am going to either raise or fold this. So from early position, I know I'm going to raise. And this will take a look and it'll tell me if I'm right or wrong. So let's say if I write for middle position, I'm going to fold this. Well, it's going to tell me that I'm wrong here. So again, this is a nice way for me to quickly look at this and say, am I, so how am I actually doing for each of these things? And you'll see I'm typing just random values in, but it's checking this against what I actually have entered for my raises or for my ranges, and I can get a sense for to test myself to see, okay, for each of these different formations, how would I play an individual quiz hand. And then when I can go through the whole thing and see how well I do. And then when I'm done, I just hit this button, clear ranges. It clears everything, and I can pick a new hand and start with that too. So again, that's I've been finding this has been helpful for me as to help internalize some ranges. And I haven't completely dialed down all my ranges yet, but spending a few minutes every day, or 15 minutes or so a couple days a week, just going through and entering 10 hands at a time, 20 hands at a time, can just provide me with some repetition, much like looking at like flashcards or something like that, to help really internalize those ranges. And again, on the last page here, it's meant to just copy paste some screenshots into here from something like Flopzilla. But actually, I one of the things that I was just thinking about today was, I have all of these ranges that I've entered into here. So with a little bit of effort, I could actually, create some grids and dynamically populate a visual range in Excel, and conditionally format it based off of the ranges that I've actually entered into this first tab in the first place. But again, the cool thing about this is that once I enter everything in these columns, the quiz updates dynamically, and then all of these summary stats update dynamically as well too. So I'll leave this, and I'll attach this spreadsheet to the post. If you have any comments or questions, or just really thoughts on how you think I could improve this, please leave a comment in here and let me know. And look forward to hopefully publishing an updated version of this at some point in the future. Thanks a lot, guys.